What up guys, it's Sunday and that means it's time for a new weekly challenge. This time it's going to be about developing our conversational skills. This is the second part in a 3-part series where we go through the art of communicating, connecting with people. Last week it was about approaching, making that initial thing happen. This week it's going to be about building rapport, getting acquainted, more surface level conversation skills, and next week it's going to be about digging to the true deep connection. But so this video is gonna outline a few tips, because even though I've gathered some intel on how to have good conversations after all my approaches and talking to random people, I am not perfect. I want to improve on this skill. That's why I put out this weekly challenge. So I have to go to the experts and see what they are saying that we should do, and the idea is that we will implement them throughout the week. However, it's so easy to get overwhelmed when we are introduced with a lot of how-tos in order to improve on things. That's why we are gonna have a focus of the day. Like this day it's gonna be all about this tip. So that means that we have that in the back of our head. Still we have a broader spectra that makes it more interesting, because it would be boring to only think about not using throughout the whole week. That's not an exciting challenge. Since I've been doing so much intense work in this area this last year, I can really reap the rewards. The biggest thing that these conversational improved skills has given me is a more joyful, happy, fulfilled life. I used to dread having conversations, overanalyzing, being up in my head, the awkward silence, hated the awkward silence. But now extract joy, energy and happiness from these moments, and I seek them out now. Enough said from my part, let's introduce these expert tips. It's from Improvement Pills channel. It's a source I really have used a whole lot to develop my social skills.
Tip number 1 is to be efficient with your speaking. Conversation is all about quality. Try to remove all types of filler words like I guess, well, you know. These words bring no value to the conversation and they literally mean nothing. Listen to the following paragraph. What did you do this winter? Well, I had an okay time this break. I went snowboarding for the first time with some of my friends, and well, it was actually a lot harder than it looked. That's about it. I guess I had fun. Haha. Now compare it to this. What did you do this winter? Me and my friends went snowboarding. It was actually my first time and it was a lot harder than it looked. Notice how the second version is much shorter, but the information being conveyed is the exact same. However, it sounds more confident and even more sophisticated. Don't be afraid to take pauses instead of relying on filler words as a crutch. Pauses can be powerful and can emphasize different parts of the message. Here's an example of pauses in action with the same sentence that we mentioned before. Me and some friends went snowboarding. It was actually my first time, but it was a lot harder than it looked. Tip number 2 is to use pauses to emphasize different parts of the message and to deliver more powerful messages. The following skill is probably the single most important skill in terms of overall conversation ability. If you can master this one skill, you'll be able to have endless conversation with just about anybody. Tip number 3 is conversational threading. Within every sentence, there are different topics that you can branch off into. Let's take a look at the following sentence. I live in New York City, but I've always wanted to move to the suburbs. It's because I love nature and I hate being around too many people. There are 4 different topics that you can branch off from here. You can talk about that time you wanted to visit New York City. You can talk about how you feel living in the suburbs. You can talk about your relationship with nature, and you can also talk about how you're an introvert and how you can relate with their hate of being around so many people. When a conversation dies, it's usually because there are no other topics to talk about that are interesting. So when given the opportunity to branch off into different topics, choose one that you're interested in talking about. Also keep in mind that you want to be giving the other person opportunities to talk about multiple topics as well. If you don't give them topics to branch off to, the conversation will eventually reach a dead end. Now this skill comes with practice. The more you try to look for topics to bounce off of, the more you will notice them. Here's another sentence. I like going to the gym. There's a sense of satisfaction I get when I see myself getting better at something. Now there are 3 different topics that you can branch off from here. You could talk about how you like going to the gym. You could talk about something that satisfies you. You can also talk about something that you got better at. Think back to the last time you went on an interview. When I think of an interview, I think of something that is high tension, nerve-wracking, and definitely not something the average person enjoys going through. A common mistake that a lot of people make when meeting someone new is entering what I like to call interview mode. They bombard the other person with question after question after question, and this can be extremely uncomfortable. The issue with asking too many questions is that it makes the conversation very one-sided. When you ask a question, you're not sharing any information about yourself. All you're doing is demanding information from the other person. This is where that uncomfortable feeling comes from. There's a lack of connection that's being built. You want to be sharing information about yourself as much as possible so that you can build rapport, build a connection. Tip number 4 is to use statements instead of questions. When you make statements, you share information about yourself. Pay attention to the next time you hang out with your close friends or buddies. You'll notice that the majority of the conversation is with statements. Once in a while, a question is thrown in as a natural step in the conversation, but the large majority will be all statements. Now, there are a lot of different types of statements, and I'll cover the main ones. We have the story opinion statement, basically a statement that tells a small story or shows your opinion on something. Here's an example of a question. What are you scared of? Here's an example of the story statement being used to replace this question. I used to be terrified of the dark. When I was a kid, I would sleep with my head under the covers to hide from all the monsters and ghosts. Notice how the question shares nothing about yourself. It doesn't really give the other person a topic to jump to besides answering your question. So you're only giving them one thing to talk about. On the other hand, the story statement shares information while it also gives the other person opportunities to talk about different topics. You're giving them different things to thread off of. They can talk about whether or not they're scared of the dark. They can talk about things they used to do when they were a kid, and they can even tell ghost stories. All of these can be branched off of this statement. Next up, we have the cold read statement. This is a great way to use statements with someone you just met. Simply put, it's an observation that you make about the other person. Instead of saying something like, hey, what do you like to do for fun? You can say something like, hey, you look like a fun person. I bet you have some interesting hobbies. This is a great trick because the person can respond in 3 different ways. Number 1, you're wrong, and they'll correct you. I'm actually not fun. I sleep all day. Number 2, you're wrong, but you'll be asked why you thought so. I'm actually not fun, but I'm curious as to why you thought that I was. And number 3, you're correct, and a large amount of rapport will be built instantaneously. I am fun. I love to dance and sing, but how did you know? Each of these ways gives you many more opportunities to branch off into different topics as compared to the simple question, what do you do for fun? So you're sharing information first, and you're not asking anything from them. It's up to them to decide how to respond. And finally, we have the random statement. They're completely random statements that are literally thoughts that just pop into your mind. And they can range from anything about things that are happening around you, observations, stories, random thoughts. There's a whole lot of things you could talk about. Here are some examples. I'm tired of my friends. All they do is talk about sports all day. Look at that guy. He's having so much fun. I wish I could be that loose. I'm thinking about taking a year off from school. Each of these statements share a lot of information about yourself. They also provide multiple topics to branch off into. And finally, they bring a sense of creativity and spontaneousness to the conversation.
So those are the tips, and the objectives are Monday through Friday, implement one of these one day at a time. We need that intensified focus to make the progress happen, to reflect on how we did on that specific thing and then improve on that, iterate on our skills. Also, a little bonus thing I will be doing is to see if I can meet up with some of the girls I was talking to last week in the challenge I had. I am gonna coach 5 girls. You should go see that one if you haven't. What a great opportunity to practice some conversations. A whole lot of excitement. That's it. That's the week that lies ahead of us, and boy am I excited. I hope you are as well. My name is Alexander Nilsson. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being awesome, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.